Hello, bruv. Since my recent cold, ruined my Robinson Jeffers little memorial, we'll move on with a book I started months ago but never completed. Lidia. This is chapter 14 of Near to the Wild Heart by Clarice Lispector. This is chapter 14, Lidia. The following morning was like a first day all over again, Joanna felt. Ottavio had gone early, and she had blessed him for it, as if he had intentionally given her time to think, to observe herself. She didn't wish to rush into any decision. She felt that any of her movements could make her precious and dangerous. No, I have trouble with this for some reason. They had been seconds, nothing but fleeting moments. You're not going to scroll down for me? That sucks. For she received Lydia's letter inviting her to call. Reading those words had made Joanna smile even before provoking these rapid, heavy heartbeats, and also the cold steel blade resting against the warmth inside her body, as if her deceased aunt had come back to life and were speaking to her. Joanna imagined the old woman's alarm, felt those open eyes, or were they her own eyes that she denied any surprises, had Ottavio returned to Lidia, despite Joanna? Her aunt would say. Joanna ran her fingers through her hair, absorbed the cold blade resting against her warm heart. She smiled once more, simply to gain time. But of course, why not continue with Lidia? She answered her dead aunt. This lucid thought caused the icy blade to press on her lungs, mocking her. Why refuse to accept events, to possess many things at the same time, to feel in various ways, to recognize life from different sources? Who would prevent someone from living expansively? Afterward, she plunged into an odd state of mild excitement. She wandered aimlessly through the house. She even wept a little, without much suffering, just for the sake of weeping. She persuaded herself nothing more, just like someone waving their hand, like someone looking. Am I suffering? She sometimes asked herself, and once more, the one who was thinking filled her with surprise, curiosity, and pride, and there was no room left for the other to suffer. But this subtle exultation did not permit her to continue on the same plane for very long. She passed at once to another tone of behavior. She played a little piano music, forgot Lydia's letter. When she remembered her vaguely, a bird flying to and fro, she couldn't decide whether to be sad or happy, calm or anxious. She kept thinking of the previous night, of the tall window pane shining serenely in the moonlight, of Ottavio's bare chest, of Joanna, who had fallen into a deep sleep, almost for the first time in her life, entrusting herself to the man who lay asleep at her side. In fact, she had not distanced herself from the Joanna full of affection from the night before. Ashamed, humble, and rejected, the latter had wandered until returning, and Joanna was increasingly more cruel, more absorbed and closer to herself, she thought. So much the better. Except that the cold steel was constantly being renewed, never became warm. Especially at the core of any thought there hovered yet another, perplexed, almost bewitched. As on the day her father died, things happened without her inventing them. In the afternoon she could at last observe Lidia, and she realized that she was as remote from her as from the other woman with the voice. They looked at each other and could not bring themselves to hate or even spurn each other. Lidia had raised, pale and discreet, various topics of no interest to either of them. Her nascent pregnancy floated throughout the entire room, saturated her and penetrated Joanna. Even those somber pieces of furniture with their crocheted mats appeared to be protected by the same secret soon to be revealed, by the same waiting for a child. Lydia's eyes were wide open and shadowless. Such a beautiful woman, her lips full but impassive, without the slightest tremor, the lips of someone who is not afraid of pleasure, who receives it without remorse. What poetry supported her existence? What was that murmuring trying to say which she could divine inside Lidia. The woman with the voice multiplied into countless women, but where was their divinity to be found? Even in the most vulnerable of those women, there lurked the shadow of that knowledge you don't acquire through intelligence. The intelligence of blind things, the force of the stone which, on falling, pushes another, which will finally drop into the sea and kill a fish. Sometimes the same strength could be found in women who are only superficially mothers and wives, the timid mistresses of men like her aunt, like Armanda. Meanwhile, that strength, that unity in weakness, oh, perhaps she was exaggerating. Perhaps the divinity of women was not specific. It was only in the fact that they existed. Yes, yes, there was the truth. They existed more than men. They were the symbol of the thing and the thing itself. And woman was the mystery in itself, she discovered. There was to be found in all women a quality of primary matter, something that might define itself but never came to be realized. For its very essence was that of becoming. For was it not precisely through that existence that the past united itself to the future and to all the time? Lydia and Joanna remained silent for one drawn-out moment. They didn't exactly feel themselves united, but without any need of words, as if they had really come together simply to look at each other and then go away. The strangeness of their situation became clearer when the two women felt that they were not fighting. In both there was a gesture of impatience. Both still had a duty to perform. Joanna pushed it aside, suddenly satisfied. Well, the tone of her voice roused her abruptly. I think our meeting is over. Lydia was astonished. But how? If they hadn't as much as said anything. Most of all, she loathed the idea of something unfinished. We haven't said anything yet. And we must have a chat, Joanna smiled. In that smile, I began to act our wariness, not with any force, but exactly as I should, in order to impress her. What are these foolish thoughts? Don't you think, Joanna asked, that we're straying from the subject that brought us together? If we discussed it, at least it would now be without interest or passion. Let's leave everything for another day. For an instant, the image of the man struck them as being blurred and importune. But Lydia knew what the moment that woman But Lydia knew that the moment that woman disappeared. I don't understand that. The apathy and torpor to which she had reduced her, leaving her powerless to move, would also vanish. And once roused, she would want the child, the little family. She made an effort to emerge from that drowsiness, to open her eyes and put up a fight. It's silly to lose the opportunity. Yes, let's buy the article. Let's buy the article. I feel exhausted after all that work preparing for the party. Joanna burst out laughing again, a laughter void of any happiness. I know that I can expect nothing from you, the pregnant woman suddenly resumed forcefully, a cloud uncovering the sun, everything shining brightly once more and brimming with life. Joanna also brightened, could feel the cloud uncovering the sun, everything bubbling gently hand in hand in a leisurely ring-a-ring o' roses, like that played by children. But suddenly the girl pushed herself in her pregnancy in one last effort to wake up. I know you. I know just how evil you are. Now the room was coming back to life. Ah, you know? Yes, it was coming back to life. It roused Joanna. What am I saying? How dare I come here? I am far away, far away. You only need to look at that woman to realize that she couldn't possibly like me. The steel suddenly rested on her heart. Ah, the jealousy, that was jealousy. That cold hand kneading her slowly, squeezing her, shrinking her soul. With me, the following happens, or else threatens to happen. From one moment to the next, by moving in a certain manner, I can transform myself into a thin line, just like that, into a streak of light, so that the person is just at my side, unable to surprise me or my imperfections. Meanwhile, Lydia has various planes. With every gesture, another aspect of her dimension is revealed. At her side, no one slips or is lost, for they can find support on her breasts, solemn, restful, and pale, while mine are futile, or on her belly, where there is even room for a child. I mustn't exaggerate her importance, for a child may be born in the womb of all women. She is so beautiful and a woman, tranquil, primary matter, despite all other women. What's in the air? I am alone. Those full lips Lidia possesses, so sensuous and clearly outlined with bright lipstick, while the one I use is dark, invariably scarlet, 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 the face white and thin, those brown eyes of hers enormous and steady. Perhaps they have nothing to offer, but they receive so much that no one could resist them, least of all Ottavio. I am a feathered creature. Lidia is covered in hair, and Ottavio is lost between us, defenseless. How can he escape from my brilliance and from within and from promise of flight? Let me start that sentence again. How can he escape from my brilliance and from promise of light of How can he escape from my brilliance and from promise of flight or from the self-assurance of that woman? We two women could form an alliance and provide for humanity. We could leave early each morning and go from door to door ringing the bell. Which does Madame prefer, mine or hers? And we would deliver a child. I could see why Ottavio didn't separate from Lidia. He is always ready to throw himself at the feet of those who walk ahead. He cannot look at a mountain without being impressed by its solidity. He cannot look at a woman with an ample bosom without wanting to rest his head there. How impoverished I am alongside her, so confident and self-possessed. Or I light up and become magnificent, instantly magnificent, or I become obscure and swathe myself in drapes. Lidia, whatever may be said of her, never changes, always has the same clear foundations. My hands and hers, mine, outlined, solitary, roughly sketched back and front with careless haste by a brush soaked in an insipid white. I'm forever raising my hand to my forehead, forever threatening to leave it suspended in midair. Oh, how futile I am. Only now do I see it. Lydia's hands are clearly defined, attractive, covered by pliant skin, pinkish, yellowish, like a flower I once saw somewhere, hands that rest on things, full of authority and wisdom. My whole being swims and floats. I cross what exists with my nerves. I am nothing if not desire, wrath, vagueness, as impalpable as energy. Energy? But where is my strength? In vagueness? In vagueness. And investing it with life. Not the reality, but merely the vague impulse forward. I want to astonish Lidia, to turn the conversation into something strange, subtle, evasive. But no, but yes, no, but why not? She suddenly remembered Ottavio stirring and blowing his cup of coffee in order to cool it, his expression serious, interested, and ingenuous. To surprise Lidia, yes, to draw her, like that time at boarding school when she suddenly felt the need to test her influence, to feel the admiration of her schoolmates with whom she generally had little contact. Then she would coldly put on an act, inventing, resplendent, as if wreaking vengeance. She emerged from the concealment of silence to engage in battle. Look at that man. He drinks his coffee with milk in the morning, very slowly, dunking his bread in the cup, allowing it to drip, munching it, then getting to his feet, heavy and sad. Her schoolmates looked, they saw some man or other, and yet, despite their being surprised and intentionally distant to begin with, and yet it was miraculously correct, they did begin to see the man get up from the table, his cup empty, some flies. Joanna continued to gain time, to advance, her eyes glowing. And that other, at night he pulls off his shoes with a struggle, tosses them into the distance, sighs and mutters to himself, what matters is not to lose heart. What matters is not to lose heart. The more impressionable girls whispered, already smiling, won over, it's true. How do you know? The others held back, but they ended up surrounding Joanna, waiting for her to show them something else. Her gestures at this point became agile, feverish, and as she became more and more inspired, she affected all of them. Look at that woman's eyes, round, transparent. They tremble and tremble. Any minute now they could dissolve into a drop of water. And what about that expression? Sometimes Joanna became more daring when she discovered a sudden shyness in those girls who read certain books in the school corridor. And what about that expression of someone seeking pleasure wherever it may be found? Her schoolmates laughed, but little by little something disquieting, painful, and awkward crept into that scene. They ended up laughing much too loudly, nervous and dissatisfied. Joanna, in high spirits, excelled herself, held the girls captive to her will and word, imbued with an ardent and cutting wit like the glancing strokes of a whip, until, hemmed in at last, they breathed her brilliant and suffocating air. Suddenly, feeling satisfied, Joanna then stopped, her eyes dry and her body shaking in triumph. Defenseless, sensing Joanna's hasty departure and her contempt, the girl also withered away, as if ashamed. One of them said, before they dispersed, bored with each other's company, "Joanna is unbearable when she's happy." Lydia blushed. The you know, of Joanna had sounded so curt, distracted, and odd, so remote from Lydia's emotion. "It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter." Joanna tried to pacify her. "So you're going to have a baby," she went on. "You want Ottavio, the father. It's understandable. Why don't you get a job to support the brat? No doubt you were expecting greater kindness on my part, despite what I've just told you about my wickedness. But frankly, kindness makes me want to throw up. Why don't you find yourself a job? Then you wouldn't need Ottavio. I'm not prepared to give you just everything. But first, tell me about your romance with Ottavio. Tell me how you managed to get him to come back to you. Or better still, what he thinks of me. Don't be afraid to tell me. Am I making him very unhappy?" "I don't know. We never mentioned your name." So I was alone then, and this joy of suffering, the steel crinkling my skin, that chilling cold which is jealousy. No, that chilling cold which is so. Oh, you walked all that way? Then you must go back. But this time I shall not make a fresh start, I swear. I shall rebuild nothing. I shall remain behind like a stone, there in the remote distance, at the beginning of the road. There is something that goes round with me. It goes round and round. It makes me dizzy. It makes me dizzy. And calmly deposits me in the same place. She turned to the pregnant woman. "It just isn't possible. He wouldn't free himself so readily. But in a certain way he loathes you," Lydia had shouted. "Ah, is that so? Do you also feel the same?" Joanna had asked. Of course, of course. It's not only hatred, despite everything. Last night, my affection, it isn't important. Deep down, I knew I was alone. At least I wasn't deceived, for I knew. I knew. And suppose it was also fear. Fear I don't understand, Lydia expressed surprise. Fear of what? Perhaps because I'm unhappy. Fear of getting close. Perhaps that's it. Fear of also having to suffer. Are you unhappy? The other had probed in a whisper. But don't be frightened. Unhappiness has nothing to do with wickedness, Joanna had laughed. What happened in the end? I'm not present. I'm not present. What happened? Weariness, a desire to leave, and tears? I know. I know. I should like to spend at least a day watching Lydia go back and forth from the kitchen to the sitting room, then have lunch with her in a quiet room. A few flies, the tinkling of cutlery, where no heat might penetrate, wearing an old baggy dressing gown in a bold floral pattern. Later in the afternoon, sitting beside her and looking on as she sewed, giving her a little assistance here and there, the scissors, the thread, waiting until it was time for her bath, and a cup of tea. It would be nice, leisurely, and refreshing. Was this perhaps what had always been missing in my life? Was this perhaps what had always been missing in my... I read that already. Why is she so powerful? I can't imagine that because I haven't spent my afternoon sewing. That this makes me inferior to her. Or does it? It does. It doesn't. It does. It doesn't. I know what I want. A woman who is ugly but wholesome with large breasts. Who might say to me, what is all this about inventing things? I won't stand for any nonsense. Come back here at once. A woman who will give me a warm bath, dress me in a white linen nightdress, braid my hair and put me to bed, thoroughly annoyed and muttering, whatever next. You run around eating at any old hour. You'll catch some illness if you're not careful, making up dramas. Do you think that makes you important? Drink up this bowl of hot broth. She raises my head with one hand, covers me with a large sheet, draws back some straggling hairs from my forehead, now clean and fresh, and says before I sink into the warmth of sleep, "You'll see how that face will soon fill out. Forget all these foolish ideas and be a good girl. Someone who will rescue me as if I were a poor stray, who will open their door to me, brush me, feed me, simply love me as if I were a dog. That's all I ask, as if I were a dog, as if I were a child. Would you like to be married, really married to him?" Joanna questioned her. Lydia had given her a sharp look, anxious to discover if the question was meant to be sarcastic. "Yes, I would." "Why?" Joanna asked in surprise. "Can't you see that you wouldn't gain anything from such a marriage? Everything marriage has to offer you already have." Lydia blushed, but I wasn't being malicious. "An ugly but wholesome woman. I'll bet you've spent your whole life wanting to get married." Lydia felt an urge to rebel. She had been touched to the quick in the coldest possible manner. "Yes, every woman," she agreed. "You're getting at me, for I never thought of getting married. The funny thing is that I still feel certain I didn't marry. This is more or less how I saw it. Marriage is a goal. After I get married, nothing more can happen to me. Just imagine to have someone always at your side, never to know loneliness. My God, never to be by yourself. Never, never. And to be a married woman, in other words, someone with her destiny traced out. From then onwards, you simply have to wait for death. I thought you couldn't even preserve the freedom to be unhappy because you drag another person along with you. There is someone constantly watching you, observing you, accompanying every move you make. And even boredom with life has a certain beauty, I thought, when you suffer it alone in quiet despair. But with two, eating the same tasteless bread day after day, seeing your own frustration mirrored in your partner's habits, the burden of the bed you share, of your life in common, plotting and threatening you with a common death. I always said never. "Why did you get married?" Lydia asked. "I don't know. All I know is that this I don't know is not just my being ignorant about things. It is the very heart of the matter. I'm evading the question. Any minute now she'll look at me. In that way I know so well. I certainly got married because I wanted to marry, because Ottavio wanted to marry me. That's it. That's it. I've got it. Instead of asking to live with me without getting married, he suggested something else. Besides, it came to the same thing, and I was foolish. Ottavio's good looking, don't you agree?" I couldn't recall anything else. Pause. "How do you love him? With your body?" "Yes, with my body," Lydia had mumbled. "It's love." "And you?" Lydia ventured. "Not quite. But he told me on the contrary." Lydia had broken off. She studied her carefully. How ingenuous Joanna seemed. She spoke of love in such a clear and straightforward manner, for it was certain that nothing had been revealed to her so far through love. She had not succumbed to its shadows. She had not yet felt its deep and secret transformations. Otherwise, she would be, like her, almost ashamed of so much happiness. She would remain vigilant at its door, protecting from the cold light what mustn't be blighted if it is to go on living. Meanwhile, there was Joanna's vivacity, what she had understood through Ottavio, that life existed inside her. But Lydia suspected that Joanna's love didn't even protect Joanna herself. Without experience, intact, unblemished, she could have been mistaken for a virgin. Lydia looked at her and tried to explain to herself what was hovering and lucid on that face. Love certainly did not bind her, even to love, while Lydia herself, almost instantly after the first kiss, had been transformed into woman. And I will stop there because there's a long way to go, bravs. All right, that'll be all for now. Goodbye.